Okay, so as of 16 minutes ago, I've seen this and I couldn't help but make a video on it. I haven't been making any videos on EU5 or sorry, Project Caesar, but this one's the British Isles, so you know what a better place to start than this. So firstly, we have a load of different map types, which I'm gonna go through. First one, climate. I'm actually really pleased that climate. Hopefully, this means that it's going to be a bit more of a thing because. I don't know, right now, you don't really know that winters happen apart from the severe winter thing that happens in EU4. And that's not really like that impactful, like you get attrition, but I'd like to see it impact things a bit more than that. So right now we have continental climates, Arctic climates, and oceanic. I mean, it looks like it's tracking it via like topography here, which is concurred by this, which is nice. Also dominated by green and pleasant flatlands and low rolling hills. Green and pleasant land, let's go England. And the periphery is punctuated by rocky mountains and craggy highlands. They want to add some more impassable locations in northern England and the Scottish borders, which I think is going to be really interesting. And they're looking for suggestions for people more familiar with the Pennines. I think that's a great decision because a lot of warfare in this sort of time period was that the English were not able to push up north. I mean, not just the English, everyone wasn't able to push up north. You can kind of take these areas of England, but pushing up north is a lot trickier, and I feel like you should be able to start emulating that. One thing that I'd like to see in EU5 is being able to use the terrain to your advantage in the same way that you can do, for example, EU4 right now, but in a way that makes sense to the AI, because right now you can send like a stack of 1Ks down south, and the AI will go and chase it. Meanwhile, you can occupy the entire land. So hopefully the AI wises up a little bit, maybe protects these passes. Good old vegetation. Makes me proud that I studied geography at school. Moors, bogs, and fens. I really hope this has an economic impact. I feel like the not biggest failing, because you have to have things simplified, but one thing that didn't really feel like made sense in EU4 to me was these flat like development modifiers of like, okay, you're in woodlands, cool, 10% malice or 20% malice to development. So it's interesting to see this. I like how some areas are defined as farmlands to grasslands. One thing I would love to see, and this is complex, I don't think this is going to happen, but the ability to change provinces from one to the other. Like if you went through a concerted effort, could you change grasslands to farmlands or woods to grasslands? Because again, EU4, everything's kind of static. Once something's put down, it's put down. So it'd be interesting to see if that's sort of a way that goes here. For example, can sparse be turned into grasslands, into farmlands? The reason you know I'm a nerd is because I got excited by the idea of raw materials. They've gone like, this is, by the way, a deep dive into England in 3037. So I'll go more into the history and the political map a little bit later on. But for now, we have the raw materials. We have the different areas in which England and Scotland and Ireland would produce things. Not like this. The further north we go, the less fertile terrain, the greater the reliance on pastoral farming, such as livestock over wheat. Yeah, that'll happen. One thing I do like here is that we have coal this early. There is like this misconception that coal was like suddenly discovered in like the 1750s, but no, when, for example, the Romans came to Britain in like the 40 AD roughly, yeah, they recorded like using coal. I mean, they found it to be a superior source of heat, so that works quite well. So I don't want people being like, oh my god, they messed up, coals in Wales. Yeah, I'm not really seeing any. What is that? Medicaments. Okay, sure. I'm just saying, I'm not seeing too many things in Ireland. I like, this is a horrible thing, but I consider if I'm playing as England, why would I invade Ireland? You know, like, what can I grab? There's aluminium up here, but there's also down here in England. So I guess there's more population, which we'll see later because they've released a population map for it. Okay, markets-wise, we are split between London and Dublin. It's interesting to me that northwest England is in the Dublin, whereas the Isle of Man is in London. What they've said here is that they wanted to show the impact that terrain can have on dynamic market attraction. So the Pennines are representing a clear blockage to it being in the London market, which, I mean, obviously not population-wise, but it feels like Dublin's a bit strong here, especially to like, I mean, this is flatlands here. I mean, I'm not sure why that's been included, but again, it's not exactly like a full playthrough, is it? Market control is a viable playstyle. I like to think of it as a form of map painting for countries not focused on traditional conquest routes, which I think is very important because EU4, especially for example if you're playing Tool, feels very lackluster in what you can do to affect other nations. I feel like a lot of Paradox games, apart from like CK3, like Victoria 3 and EU4 particularly, there's not really many things that you can do to sort of push your will forwards on the international stage, aside from just conquering and hiring mercenaries. Like, you can offer condos to the area, for example, in EU4, but it's not really that important. Whereas I feel like something like this, like if you were switching, like if you're looking at the market control map and that's your like world conquest map, I think it's very, very cool. And also, like the fact that London still has a holdover here, that's great. So I'll summarize this idea about culture. So the first thing is that there's a monolithic English culture, which I completely agree with. I think England itself was, at this point, it saw itself as united, sort of united front. And it's not, they say here just like it's, you know, in the face of Viking invasions. It's not just in the face of Viking invasions. It's also in the face of when England first formed, the Irish, Strathclyde and the Highlanders came down and fought the English as well. Because they didn't want, they obviously weren't idiots. They knew that a unified English state to the south would start to try and dominate the British Isles. And obviously it's true that they very much went and did that. It's kind of in their nature. But that also cemented the idea of an English culture. But I do like the fact they have Cornish down here as well, because even today, Cornish is felt to be distinct and has more ties to Wales. I mean, I lived down here for about 3 years during my degree, so I know a little bit about that. And I like how they distinguish between the different types of Scot. That was also very important. On the border here, you might think you think Scotland, then you think England, and you think, okay, well, here's the English culture, here's the Scottish culture. But on the border, because borders obviously at this point, they're not as formalized as all this. We see lines on a map because that's how we see countries in the modern day. But people would hold loyalty for their Scottish lands to the Scots and their English lands to the English, and they would have land on both sides, and there was border skirmishes, and they were basically indistinguishable between the two. Obviously, there were some minor differences, but that's quite an important distinction to make. The Highlanders were completely different in culture. Well, very different in my opinion, actually. I'm backing it. Distinctly different to the guys on the border with the English. I like the fact there's still some Norse presence up here. It's Norwegian, obviously, up here, but the Norse Gaelic, very unique culture there. And I'm also intrigued by the Anglo-Irish. So Normans conquering into Ireland, obviously multiple excursions to Ireland did start to create its own unique blend between the two. Because how do you give out land that you don't have? Simple. You conquer more and then you give it out to people as loyalty. So if you go and take land in Ireland, then you can give it to loyal people, which is part of the reason the English went into Ireland. Obviously part of just wanting to conquer and general imperialism really starting from them. People have this idea of the British Empire starting in sort of the later stage of the early modern period. But frankly, I think you like after that battle I was talking about earlier, you have the seeds for the English to dominate the British Isles, and they would seek to do so, obviously. Now, this is what I'm intrigued about. So, at this point, you're starting to see it sort of gently go away. Henry V was the first king that banned French, basically. It started saying, okay, we're English, we speak English. Everyone at that point, because the Normans spoke French, the lower class would speak English, the upper class would speak French. That's why a lot of words in the English language, the posher ones, are French, and the more common ones are English, because the aristocracy spoke French, much to our eternal shame. But still, it's fine. It's okay. We'll get over it. And it doesn't impact the map mode, but I do enjoy the fact they've gone through and taken pains to say, for example, Flemish weavers from the Low Countries are here. The Low Countries and the British Isles had a tumultuous relationship. Up until this point, if you were exiled, then you would leg it to Flanders. The Godwins, famous for Harold Godwinson and Godwin himself, who was an incredible political animal, but everyone forgets about him. They had into a spat with Edward the Confessor, legged it to Flanders. It's kind of a key part of English culture here, and obviously it's all Catholic, so there's not really much point in a religious one. But there are some minorities of Jewish people in Scottish and Irish towns. Now I've got other areas, and I don't want to comment on the split in Ireland. As you said, there's 4 provinces of Ireland here. I don't feel qualified. I'm going to focus on this lot. I feel like this is quite a fair split. Home counties, East Anglia, West County, Wales, Midlands, Northumbria. They're broad. That's what I mean. Like, I'm not sure why the Midlands would be in the Dublin section. It feels like it'd be easy to get from London, but, we'll see how that plays out. And now we have the provinces. I like this. The ancient Scottish Isles are pretty messy and difficult to coalesce into neat provinces, and so any suggestions for a better arrangement would be very welcome. I like the fact that they are saying, look, we aren't too sure about certain things because it's hard to be an expert. How do you find an expert? You literally ask, hey guys, how would this have been sort of divided up? So I'm going to look at the English one down here. So Cornwall and Devon being split is, I think that's good. this is all fine. I mean, Bedfordshire's kind of large. I mean, they've gone off the English counties, which is kind of fine, which remained fairly consistent with the history like there. Merging some of those too small. Okay, fair enough. So that's why it looks a little bit weird to my English eyes. But I feel, generally speaking, like the English one is really easy to divide because you can go off of historic counties. Like the English were very, very rich from like sort of 1066 onwards. They would rival the Byzantines sometimes in wealth. And that's not because they produced a lot, but because they were ridiculously tax efficient. The exchequer, which we still have to this day, it evolved obviously, but the exchequer was a fantastic tool that was used to make sure tax efficiency was at peak. And so we have this county system, and so using it, I think, is sort of fair. And then we have the locations. God, it's a lot of locations. It's gonna, like, my biggest fear here is that it's not going to, like, it's gonna like destroy people's CPUs. So things are written in English and Irish, so it depends if you take it over. Same as EU4. That's cool. I always like the fact that things get cool. Like, for example, especially if you're Basque, for example, and you conquer London, then it changes its name based on that. It's very cool. And then we have government types, obviously monarchies all over the place, then a tribal one down here. And I'm really intrigued to see how this is going to affect things. Obviously, tribal types, government types are a big, big feature of EU4. And I want to see if it matters as much in EU5 in terms of the dynamism between the two. Now, the government reform system for EU4 was a fantastic innovation, in my opinion. The Livonian Order, I've always maintained the whole Livonian Order building their own nation-state thing was practiced for EU5. So we'll see how much that helps. And then we have the actual countries themselves. So England is the dominant. I'll summarize for you. England is the dominant kingdom. Obviously, it's England. We have the City of London, which is very, very cool because the City of London, to this day, the City of London has had ancient powers for as long as we have records. We're not sure where powers come from. For example, we have in the Barons' Revolt, where this is seen as the foundation for democracy in the more modern sense, where the barons forced the King John at the time, brother of the hated Richard the Lionheart, forced him to sign a document saying that no man could be in prison for no reason, yada yada. But part of that was London shall retain its ancient rights. But we don't know where those ancient rights come from. They just are. And even in the modern day, London has special privileges and we don't know where they come from. So it's fantastic. And so part of that, the Burgess estate in the City of London enjoys ancient freedoms from royal power. Very, very cool. And then the County Palatine of Durham, which is up here, which is, I mean, hey, that's convenient. That's where I also studied. Has its own special clergy estate that gives a huge amount of locations it's present in, which is very cool. Cornwall is a releasable country. It's all you can really ask for from Cornwall. And they're not sure about the Isle of Man. So it's the subject of England. I like that. I think the Isle of Man being a subject of England, given how many times it switched between the Scots and the English, makes sense. Okay, Wales. This is the big thing I wanted to look at because the way EU4 does Wales, like, Wales is a lot more like rowdy, I think. It was not formally annexed into the Kingdom of England until the mid-1500s, which is fair, and it begins as a dominion subject under England. Cool. This is interesting. There's an alternative vision of Wales that is expanding it to include the earldom of Chester and the march on the English side of the north or the modern border. If an Englishman familiar with the modern borders might look alarming, but they were ambiguous with the Welsh marches until the 1500s. So hand over to the Wales play the full responsibility of dealing with the marcher lords, allowing England to focus on the bigger picture like beauty France. I don't know that I agree with that, because whilst, yes, there were marcher lords, and they were called the Welsh Marches, they were still distinctly, like, there was still a delineation of what is Wales and what is England. So I don't think that Chester should be included. I'm happy to be proven wrong there, but I'm personally of the opinion that the earldom of Chester should remain in England. It was kind of the first, like, if the Welsh got routed, is the first line of defense. So I feel like it's more in England than it is in Wales. It's never going to fit in a perfect system like that, but yeah. Okay, so Ireland, this is an interesting one. We have the tannery system, which makes sense, but then we have chaotic feuds between rival branches. Now, this is the part in EU4 where, like, it doesn't really show anything about Ireland. Like, you just have tiny little countries, whereas it was a lot more flexible than that, more so than pretty much anywhere else in Western Europe, I'd say, to be honest. Apart from whatever the hell was going on in the HRE. I'm not countering that one. This is the interesting part. Anyone powerful enough could theoretically claim the title of High King. The former provincial kingdoms, such as Meath and Connaught, enjoy elevated rank in duchy, give them a slight edge in the High Kingship selection. So they're going to select a High King, and that's going to give you some bonuses, but not sort of direct rule, which I think is fundamental to Ireland, really. You had several High Kings throughout Irish history, and yet it was a very, very difficult place to maintain control over. I wonder how they're going to hold this. Yeah, so you've got the... So the Balliol are a separate faction. Interesting. So to be clear, he was going for the Scottish throne. He was allied to the English. Well, I wouldn't really say allied per se. I mean, he says he's English allies, but like, so we'll see how that plays out. I wonder if you could maybe get as the English, you can maybe get a Scottish vassal very, very quickly. We have the Plantagenets and then all of these different Irish dynasties. And here we go, their big old population map mode. So with this, it should be very clear why why England dominated the British Isles. Look at the population differences. I mean, you're not even breaking 1 million here, and then you got 5.36 million. I mean, it's more than. Let's see down here, 81,000 in London is more than, I mean, several areas of Ireland. You know, and obviously that's how population works. 5.36 seems a little high. So I'm looking at a couple of different papers here because it felt a little bit wrong to me. And in 1350, the population was 3 million. In 1348, we're looking at 3.7 million. So the 5.36 million figure it's very, very large. But that's a little bit, yeah, that's quite high. So I'm not too sure about that. Like, that does seem very, very high.
I didn't ask for this. Some say it's training. Some say it's goddamn God-given talent. I've been in this game for 10 years. Seen everything. From one tags to world conquests. But there's always just one more achievement. These new cats, they think they've got it all figured out. But at the end, we'll see who's still standing. 60 minutes on the clock. They say if you lose, you're as good as dead. But what do I know? I'm just a caster. They call it Parabellum.
The thing I do want to touch on is this Tinto Talks number 16. It is quite a short one, but I figured I'd go into it nonetheless. And here we're looking at the cabinet, which is previous stuff that would be handled by Mana, which, as we know, Johan really, really doesn't like. So obviously a bigger cabinet, I don't say obviously, but generally speaking, reading this, a larger cabinet means you're a more advanced country. So therefore, you can do more things like pacify Cornwall and increase control in Cambridgeshire. Never been a fan of the control mechanic. We'll see how that ends up working. And I do like this. The Pope might be upset if you employ a heretic as a Catholic ruler. I feel like, and I really hope I don't get misquoted and put out of context here. I feel like EU4 was too tolerant, insofar as no one really cared. You'd have one or two events, but no one really cared if you had an advisor that was of a different faith, if your heir was a different culture. Like it was really kind of willy-nilly. And the same thing with Victoria 3. Like having a different faith doesn't really matter. Like the gameplay is not fundamentally different. But that's like what I really want. What I'm talking about here is I really want EU5 to nail the feeling that a spectacular cabinet member has to overcome the issues of selection with regards to differing from the dominant culture or religion. Roger II, for example, about 100 years before the time that EU5 is gonna start, 150 or so, had a very multi-ethnic cabinet and multi-ethnic kingdom. He had Orthodox guys from the Byzantines, he had Catholics, and he had Muslims from North Africa and from beyond. He also had a lot of Jews. And he faced a lot of issues, but also gave him several advantages. For example, when the Pope said, everyone marching against me is going to be excommunicated, Roger II's army kind of shrugged and went to war anyway. The reason for it, they were all Muslim, so they didn't really care much about getting excommunicated. But yeah, here are the different things you can do. Counter-espionage, develop province, diplomatic endeavors, encouraging migration, expelling people, and increasing control. I like this. The societal laws, values, reforms, and even some state approaches can affect how effective your guys are at their relative tasks. EU4, you have a static number, and I always feel like static numbers are useful to simplify things, but generally speaking, not great. So the fact that you have these different kind of conditions. One thing I would like to see, and I think is very important, and I'll finish on this, for Project Caesar and EU5, is we need to get rid of this. Allows presidents to migrate, yes. Because you and I, as we're excited for this game, we are used to paradox speak. We're used to it saying one of the following, and then there being a checklist and this sort of stuff. That is inherently bad because it produces a barrier of entry for trying to read things. I still struggle to read some events and stuff. Maybe that's because I'm an idiot. But I'm saying if you're playing a video game for the first time, you're seeing allows peasants to migrate. Yes, I just think that the quality of life team needs to just spice that up a little bit, make it a bit more digestible. Just because we can read it because we use Paradox games doesn't mean that everyone's going to be able to. And Paradox needs a bit of a win here. And I think that with the breadth and complexity that Project Caesar and EU5 is going for, you do need to make it as accessible as possible by putting things into plain or English where possible. We'll see. Anyway, that is where I'll leave it today. If you want to see more of EU5 and Project Caesar updates, please do let me know in the comments down below. Make sure to like the video and subscribe so I know this is the kind of stuff you want to see. I've been sort of watching from a distance. I've been throwing a bit of a tantrum, not gonna lie. The reason I haven't been covering the Tinto talks is because I hired a historian to research exactly when EU5 was gonna start, and the video was ready to go live, and then they just announced it. So I had the start date because I'd gone through I'd made this video where I'd hired a historian and gone through this effort of like, here's where it's gonna be, here's the different thresholds, here's why, like all this different stuff. Spent a lot of money on it, only for them to announce it about 2 days before I was ready to release. So I was a little bit salty, I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, hope you enjoyed, and hopefully we'll see more. Goodbye.